going to show you how I do sand cement render and get it finished, like what's behind me here. Quite an awkward one, but I'll get as much details as humanly possible into this video. The first stage of rendering, and obviously after the scratch coating's all done, all that preparation, we're talking about the top coat here. The first stages is coating it on, and I like to always start at the top, and we're at the very top here on a peak. But yeah, doesn't really matter where you start, left or right. Again, starting at the top is good, as you will not be dropping stuff on your fresh render, so you'll be finishing it on the way down, so any dirt falls will be fallen before you've actually finished the top, so you'll be finishing it on the way down. Same sort of reason why you would paint the ceiling before you paint the walls, or why you would plaster a ceiling before you plaster the walls. You're working your way down. And so coating, hawk and trowel will be needed. I'm using a board here and trying to put it on as neat as possible. You can see the walls been wet down. It's actually quite a warm and windy day, not ideal for rendering. My ideal weather is actually just a normal day, not too warm, possibly cloudy. Cloudy is good because it keeps the sun from baking your wall, and again, you don't want wind. Wind is just going to dry your render. If it's in the middle of winter, that's all well and good. You'll take all the sun and nice breeze that you can get, as long as it's not a cold chill. But we're coming into the summer here. We're in spring, and this is pretty nice, like a summer's day. But so back to stage one. Get the wall coated, get it scraped down, wet down if needs be. If you scratch it the day before, depending on size, you might not need to wet it down too much. And obviously your mix, plenty of mixing videos on the channel. They'll be really covered in detail there. But yeah, so you can see, trying to get this on as neat as possible using the hawk and trowel, and my top coat is 4:1. I know a lot of people scratch with 4:1. Again, I always say, as long as that works for you, keep going. If you want to do it my way, that's good too. The sand we use here, this sand actually is quite nice and a bit more fine, but usually plastering sand's a sharp sand. It's got a bit of grit to it, and I usually scratch 2:1 followed by 4:1. And in this we have waterproofers and mortar mix plasticizer. So the plasticizer helps the workability, so it's not just a dead lump of sand and cement. Gives a bit of flow to it and helps you coat it. You can see that it's spreading quite nice for me, and it's loose. It's not really racking my arm yet. I haven't got that stage, but yeah. And the waterproofer gives it a shield against rain, and should help basically stop it penetrating the wall, and should repel the water away. Again, this building is going to get painted, so it will have an extra layer of defense against that. Again, it was originally sand and cement, so going sand and cement is no problem whatsoever. So your idea here is get it coated neat as possible. You don't want to spend a terrible big amount of time just trying to keep it neat. You don't want to play with it too much. You kind of just want to get it on, spread it neat as you can. Keep your hawk on there. I always keep my hawk on there. You see, I collect a lot of gear, and that just saves you from mixing up stuff and then throwing it all over the ground. If you can keep that hawk, a wee bit of discipline. Watch here, sort of try and keep the hawk underneath where I'm working. Not that time, but usually underneath the trowel, and that'll catch any wee bits of fall. Basically, step 2, stage 2. Before we get to all that rubbing up and sponging and making it smooth, we gotta do the straightening up. And for the peak here, again, this could be any shape of wall, a small wall with copings on it, and a wall inside and a gauge. It's all got the same principles. You want to get it straight after you have it all coated. Again, the neater you coat it, the easier it is going to be straightened. And I'm using a serrated refina feather edge up the top here. There is a bit of reason on that, is I kind of want to get it rubbed up, sponged, and onto the next lift. But usually you don't have to use, you could use a piece of wood. If it's straight, that's the key. Don't use any wonky bananas, as your wall will follow that shape. So what I'm doing is I'm just pulling along the top, opening the serrated edge is opening up the surface, which will actually make it dry that bit quicker. But basically, the good thing about the serrated edge as well, if you are learning how to render, you're DIY, the serrated edge gives you that, you can see exactly where I've my hollows here, my slacks, and you can see now I'm filling them in. This is a big key to this, guys. This is a big important part of rendering, is getting it as straight as possible before you even think about trying to finish it. And again, at the same time, I'm not ripping loads off here, I'm just lightly straightening this. And the reason for that is, like I said, it's a warm day, so I'm not wanting to cut it all way back till it's a wee thin coat. I'm sort of leaving a good healthy coat on there. When we're talking about coats, another question I get asked loads on is depth. And to answer that, it can be all different, but basically you're probably around 20 mil in both coats. Your first mill could probably be between 5 and 10, and then this top coat's probably again between 8 and 10. Maybe 10, bit more when you put it on, and then when you're cutting it back off, you might lose some in some areas. But if you have a neat scratch coat, it should all be working pretty even. And like I said here, we're keeping it on a bit fatter, and that's because of the weather. We don't want it to dry, so we're not trying to scrape and scrape back. We're just really just taking the high spots off and filling the lows, which I'll show you that now. Basically, anything you see now smooth is a miss. It's shallow, and I will need to put some more sand cement render on that, and then re-straighten it. And that's that smooth bit there. And basically, they don't always be very heavy. So the way I like to do it is I actually like to build it out gradually. I don't want to put too much on. I tend to find if you build it out nice and slow and gradual, there's less likely big sags, big drops, because you're not trying to force the render out, you're taking it out piece by piece. And let's see if the one fill was enough. Let's see if it all does come off nice and straight. Not too bad. And you can always use this type of straight edge to push in some render into the holes also. So when you do get it all straight, it's time to do your finishing. And I'm giving the Refina Power Float another blast on this big gable. Sort of had it more on standby if things started to dry and get a bit too far. This was going to be the weapon, but seemed to be a wee bit more on top of this peak and hasn't got too far ahead. Again, if you're a DIYer, you don't gotta have a tool like this. I find it brilliant when the stuff's drying. I'm doing big bulk, maybe on my own. I do like it, and I still do touch up and finish with the float and sponge floats. Again, the sponge on this bad boy is pretty good, but I kept the float on it. It's like a diamond float on it, and you supposedly you can go early with them. I don't mind going early, but I definitely prefer when the stuff's all gone nice and crispy on the surface. I find this power float works a much better treat for me then. But so you can see I more or less wiped it out with the power float, Just really touch it up now with the small hand float. Again, you don't need the power float. You can use a nicely broken float like I'm using. It's just basically a polyurethane float. If you do inside work, you can break them in pretty quick. If they are a bit new, you might want to sand in the edges a bit, especially if you're not, been at plastering and rendering for a long time. You'll find a new float can dig in quite a lot, so you'll maybe want to just round the edges off, take the sharp edges off the back and the front of the float. Otherwise, you'll be creating more big holes to fill in. And now we're on the finishing part. You see what I'm doing? I'm actually any wee bits of holes that are getting missed by the float when I'm putting the float, rubbing it over. Just fill them back in slightly, guys. And depending on if you're trying to finish the render and it's dry, you will need to put a bit of pressure in that. But if it's still wet, like it sort of is here, I don't need to use too much muscle. I'm just taking it easy, and if there is, any holes, I'm just gently rubbing them in with a bit of fresh material. And before long, you will have a big area rubbed and finished. Well, nearly finished. That's still to come, the actual finishing part. But on this stage, practically stage 3 of finishing your top coat, you'll want to concentrate on the driest areas. If it's really wet, leave it. If you have the whole wall on, search the wall for drier areas. Where's the sun hitting? Where's the wind hitting? What was on first? What was not wet as much? All these things will contribute to where you want to start rubbing up. And take this for example. This peak was first on. The next lift was then coated, straightened, and then it came back up to the peak to start rubbing. It was first on. It was wet, but you could see that the scratch coat had started to just slowly dry again. 2, there's a bit of a breeze. You can see that from my t-shirt. And 3, the sun's out. So, you kind of want to get back up there and get it finished. I'm not a bad plasterer at finishing things when they're wet, but if you are new, you might want them to go a bit drier, and this will create you to have to really work and put a bit of pressure in, as it is better if you're new. That's how all plasters learn on it, when it's a wee bit drier. And then what you actually find is over time your float breaks in, and your skill level increases, so the tool you use gets better and you also get better, which makes the work easier, makes finishing sand cement render easier. I have a wee trowel, a wee float, and it's really, really well broken, but I could handle this peak when it's wetter, and I could get round it quicker with that float, but I'm still in the midst of breaking this float in really good. If you do notice, there's nails still in it. This is my devil float, and I use it for my float set. So when I'm inside, I use that to rub the walls up and leave a key. But when I'm doing smooth renders, I have to knock the nails out, and don't want lines on the wall unless we're trying to help dry it, but not in this situation. We're trying to get it finished. But so you can see a wee bit of stuff goes a long way, and that's why I always use my trowel, put a bit of stuff on it, and just nip off and fill in as I go. And like I say, don't look at the whole wall and think, wow, the whole wall. Concentrate on the dry areas, get them finished. Or if everything's drying all nicely uniform, concentrate left to right, or right to left, top to bottom. Take it in small sections. No point going mad looking at it and going, how am I going to finish this? There's so much to do. basically just take it in small bits and take your time, get it right. But before long, you will have a large section done, or the whole wall. You know, look at this for instance. It's all pretty much dry and nice and uniform, but I've concentrated on my left side and I'm taking it from left to right, and we're nearly half done on the float section. But we'll move on now. Think I've covered everything with the float. If not, drop me some questions and I'll for sure answer them. Basically, for the final touches, you'll either want to use a sponge float or a nice new car sponge, and that'll just help further close it in. I like to just sponge float it after it's been floated in. I find it leaves a very nice wee finish, but you can trowel it in and then sponge it. It also leaves a very nice finish. I prefer not troweling. I like the sponged up finish that bit better. And like I said, sponge floats are great. You have that much more control and power, but a car sponge is also very nice if you know how to use them. Some aren't great, some are better than others, but most of the sponge floats I've used are pretty good.